everyone. My name is Karen, and I am an alcoholic.
Hey, Karen.
I haven't done this in a while, so I'm a little rusty. But I do have a home group. My home group is fast. We meet on Wednesday nights at 8 o'clock. Anybody is welcome. We started a small big book study on Thursday nights, also at 8 o'clock. You're welcome to come to that as well. My sobriety date is April 15th, 2001. And I will mention, since today is the day that it is, 20 years ago I was able, for the grace of this program, to be able to travel to New York. I had a neat little device on my car that allowed it to start. Because the day before, on September 10th, 2001, my aunt had passed away. And then September 11th happened. And my closest friend, we've been friends for over 50 years, had two cousins that were New York City firemen, and they were both missing, and she was so distraught. So I was able to go to New York and drive past that horrific scene, and was able to be there for her because of the 5 little months that I had, and that I owe to this program, because I wouldn't have had the presence of mind to be able to do that had I kept doing what it was that I was doing. So I know, when I come into a room of AA, I always think, a lot of people come because, they love the fellowship, they love the people they're going to see, and they've gotten to be good friends with them and everything else, and it's a good, warm place to be. Other people come in because maybe, they got a problem and they're scared to death and somebody told them they need to be here, so they're here. And other people come because they're completely, utterly lost, scared to death, and don't know what to do, and the gig is up, and they kind of wander in scared out of their mind. I've been all three, honestly. I really have. When I first came in these rooms, I didn't want to be here. I didn't want to be an alcoholic. I wanted to be anything but an alcoholic. I thought my upbringing and my knowledge of this disease should prevent me from becoming an alcoholic. I have a long line of them on both sides of the family. So I don't know if there's a gene component or not, but perhaps if there is, I am one of the ones lucky enough to get this disease if I have to get one. So a little bit of background. My first drink was probably at the age of 13, and I drank alcoholically. We were out on a boat, and my friends had stolen it from their parents' liquor cabinet, and we were all having fun, jumping in the water and doing all kinds of things, and somebody opened up the liquor bottle. We were taking sips of it, and then they would, get back on the sunfishes and do the fun things that teenagers do, and I stayed on the boat with the bottle because I liked how it made me feel. And I for some reason, drank alcoholically the very first time I drank. So, and I can go on with different, and then I took a break because, like I said, I come from an alcoholic family. But if I back up a little bit, I grew up on Long Island, and it was a very fun place to grow up. We had a lot of, I'm one of 5 children in the middle. We had a lot of activities. We did a lot of fun things, but I grew up in the era when if there was something that was less than, presentable to the public, you didn't talk about it. So you didn't talk about, any family problems. You didn't talk about alcoholism. You didn't talk about mental illness. You didn't do any of that. But that's not the kid that I was. The kid that I was happy, carefree, go lucky, go out there, grab the world, tell everybody everything. I was very obnoxious child, very. And I didn't know how to keep my mouth shut until, as time went on, I would get disciplined. Not, my parents were loving and good and stuff like that, but they were strict. My father was a Marine, so he was pretty strict with us. But I did learn that there were certain things that you weren't supposed to talk about, and to kind of keep those close and not talk about them. Well, enough things happened that were serious enough and whatnot that they were bothering me as a child. and I had no outlet. So put somebody who's got all this bottled up stuff that doesn't know how to talk about them and get to the teenage years and put a bottle of alcohol in her hand, I was off to the races. And then I stopped because as I said, I grew up in a household. My mother was an alcoholic and suffered terribly, but she was a periodic drinker, would drink on a binge for 3-4 days or whatever. Every 3 months, 6 months, maybe she'd go a year or whatever, and we weren't allowed to tell anybody what was going on. So the whole dynamic of the household changed, and we were to be, we would do the cleaning, and we would do the dinner, and we would do the things that we were supposed to do. So that was something that I took with me, that I knew that she didn't want to be. She struggled so hard with this. She didn't want to drink, but she drank. And I understood it as a little kid, that this was something that she could not control. And I got that, but I wasn't going to be that. So, but I did learn to be quiet. I did learn to bottle everything inside. I did, that free spirit was like this free bird that somebody caught and put in a cage. And I stayed there. I stayed there over the years. And then I could tell you all the drunk log stories. I could tell you, how driving home one time when I was an adult and older and whatnot and had some kids, how I had indulged in alcohol and other things, and I'm driving home, and the road was completely black, and the only thing I could see were the lines that were very close to the car, and trees and black tunnel. I had no business being behind the wheel of a car, and yet I was driving, and I was driving children home. And those kinds of things, because when I drank, I always overserved myself, always. Then I got to have a little bit of a tolerance when I got a little bit older, and we'd go out and have a good old time. It was that kind of thing, But I would always, in short order, be back to consuming way more than anybody should consume and be out in public or be anywhere, actually. But it pulled me. From the time I had that first sip, I wanted more and more and more. And I didn't understand it, and I didn't know why. I just thought I just needed to learn better control. I needed to figure out how to not drink like that. So I would switch it up, like everybody says, do this, do that, whatever. None of that ever worked for me. I could tell you stories about how, later on I had one failed marriage, left with 3 kids to raise by myself. We, did the thing that you do when you're in a messy situation. You get a bunch of friends together and you drink over it, and you drink your problems away. The problems didn't go away. They were still there. And then, I got to get a grip on that. So it's a cycle that you could just say, you do it, rinse, repeat. You do it, rinse, repeat, because that's how it was for me. But I would have these stretches of sobriety because I was so afraid of myself. It's really what it was. I had knowledge of this and fear of this, but I would always succumb and pick it back up and feel, horrible about myself the next day. It got to the point where I got married again, had another child, and that relationship was volatile, I guess is a good word for it. It wasn't exactly healthy. Yeah. So anyway, we struggled, and then he actually was in this program for a little while. I wouldn't come because he was the one with the problem. He's the one that needed help. He needed to get this deal so we could have a normal life. And yeah, that was just me lying to myself again, hiding, keeping the secret. Nobody knew what I was going through. None of my family knew any of this because that's how I behaved. So a little while later, there were some profound losses in my life in kind of rapid succession that really another thing that I did not know how to communicate. I didn't know how to share the hurt that I was feeling. Excuse me. And more things I hid. And the only relief that I got from all this torture that was going on, a husband that was not happy with the situation, the loss of my parents, and then shortly thereafter the loss of my best friend who was my brother, I didn't know how to cope. I had no coping skills. So, you give me a little bit of alcohol and I could relax, let free. I could put, the children, one that was home, to bed, and I could just let loose if I wanted to. I could dance in the living room. I could be crazy again. I could turn on all the old music. I could be nutty, or I could just sit and cry. That's what I wanted to do, and play the sad song over and over again, rinse and repeat, because we're dramatic when we're drinking. We have to be weird, and I was. I did it, and then wake up the next morning and say, I'm not going to do that again. I feel like crap, But all the while, I was still able to work and function and whatnot, And then there's the time where the kids are all grown and the son's probably at a friend's house or whatever, and I was drinking for whatever. Maybe it was St. Patty's. I don't know. Anyway, I was drinking, and somehow I got back home and the headlight was missing from the car, and I didn't know where I was. I didn't know where that happened. I had no clue. And a couple of weeks later, I get a phone call from a state trooper telling me he had my headlight and wanted to know what happened. And I told him I couldn't tell him. And I wasn't lying, because I couldn't. I didn't know. Then I did call AA, and Ginny picked me up and brought me to AA. And I did stay for a while. I felt awkward. I felt a lot of people knew my ex, and I was afraid to share with everybody because they thought he was wonderful, because when he was sober, he was. The other parts weren't to be told, so I was stuck in that. So eventually, I was probably sober for about 9 months. And then we went through that awful divorce, standing in front of a judge and whatnot, and that made me very, very uncomfortable. And then I, went back to my hiding and doing the things that I did. And as I said, growing up, I grew up in the 60s and 70s, so there's other things in my story, which I did prefer, by the way. The dry kids were great. If I drank too much, I got super sick, I didn't with the other stuff. It's just the truth of it, But I did know that, it wasn't healthy for me. And I remember saying every time afterwards, I'd look up to my understanding of my higher power and say, God, I'm sorry. Thank you for getting me through this one. I won't do it anymore. But the real conviction wasn't there, not at all. And then, like I said, after that, I did drink again. And this time, it was it was a Saturday before Easter. And I got it in my head that I needed to drink. I wasn't feeling good. It was going to take the stomach ache away. It was going to do all the things that in my mind it could do, and it ended up a total disaster that night, which I hope is my last drunk. I pray is my last drunk. I sideswiped somebody, kept going. The only way they got me to stop was a state trooper parked his vehicle perpendicular in the road to get me to stop. I wasn't speeding or anything. I didn't know he was even behind me. It's so pathetic. And of course they arrested me, and he wanted to know the name of somebody he could call, and I wouldn't give it. I wouldn't give him the name of anybody because I did not want to be released. I wanted to stay there. I had so much self-loathing. I talk about it in our book, how awful, demoralizing humiliation we feel, and I was there. I was absolutely there, and it was a while, and eventually, they put you in the cell with a burlap outfit on that's so becoming, and you're sitting there saying to yourself, don't let me out. At least here I can't hurt anybody. I can't hurt myself. I can't hurt the ones that I love. Just keep me here. But that wasn't to be, and they let me out. My daughter picked me up, and she was devastated and brought me home, and it was at that moment something snapped inside. Something changed. And for the first time, honestly, in all the struggles, because life wasn't always easy during the time from the first marriage to this point. There were very difficult times. And up until this point, I had never once asked anybody for help. I just wouldn't do it. My pride was so awful that it just kept me from asking for help. But that night, I did. I said right out loud, I need help. Okay, so my daughter wants to take me to the hospital over here, and you don't really want to go to the place of your employment because people might recognize you. And we got to the emergency room, and I wanted to bail. But then I might have been a little hasty there, overreacted. Don't quite really think that I need to go, here. But then they talked me into going, and I did. And so really, that was the first place that anybody, I think some of you might remember Ellen. She was wonderful, and she helped me see, honestly, what the disease was and what it was doing to me and how I could recover. That I just had to be okay with asking for help and taking some good direction from people who had been there. And that was something I had never experienced before. My mother wouldn't go to AA. She did hers privately on her own. A lot of faith. God bless that woman for the last 25 years of her life. She never drank a drop, and she did it on her own. I wasn't wired that way. I needed to get the garbage that was inside out so that I could relate to life and figure out what it was that was my triggers. So it's really funny because when I got to, they called it PTC at the time, they were trying to figure out whether or not, they could arrange for me to have some little long-term treatment or whatnot. I was diagnosed as chronically depressed and alcoholic, and I'm like, I don't think I'm depressed. I just think things got, sad for a little bit, and I drank, and doesn't everybody do that, And, whatever. But, but the insurance wouldn't cover it. So there I was. I was, let out. My daughter had taken my son, so I went home to an empty house with myself. Not a good combination. But I knew enough that, it was pretty serious and I needed to do something about it. So I did. Ginny came and got me. She brought me to meetings. She'd drop me off and say, you want to go to a meeting tomorrow? And I'd say, I think I'm going to stay home tomorrow. And she would answer, I'll be here at 7:30. Okay, guess I'm going to a meeting. And she really kept close to me in the beginning and really made sure, and so did so many other people. I remember coming to the women's meeting here one Saturday and looking at a picture that I swear was that picture, but it was like 4 times that size. Or the medication they had put me on when I first got out of PTC made it look that size. Who knows? But anyway, I remember thinking if I could just walk all the way to that rainbow, maybe my life would get better. But how am I ever going to get there the way that I feel now? And I felt very lost and alone and different. I felt so different from all of you, it wasn't even funny. That I didn't belong here, that if you knew what my life was like, blah, blah, blah. All the whining stuff. So, but I did. I began this journey, and I did, because I knew that my thinking was what got me here. And I was ready to let anybody else tell me how to live my life, because clearly I wasn't doing such a good job of it. My daughter had like I said, taken my son, and after a week or so, maybe even less, she let him come back home, and he was my biggest champion. He was 12 years old, and he just kept saying, Mom, you're doing so good. You go into one of those meetings? And I'd bring home, a 30-day chip. They didn't have 60 days at that time. I'd bring home a 90-day chip or whatever, and he was so excited. And he really made me feel like I was finally doing something right in my life, and that meant a lot. So I continued. Did I know what I was doing? Absolutely not. Were there nights when I wanted to stay home? Absolutely. But that little voice in the back of my mind said, you had 6 years sobriety, twice, in between these jaunts. And clearly you couldn't stay sober on your own. You need to do something different. So I did, and I did right away get into some service work. It was like Ginny brought me to intergroup. So I did intergroup, and I did it, and I did it, and I did it, and I did it, and tried to give my position away. Nobody would take it, as happens sometimes in this. And then they had me, doing some secretary work for the district, and next thing you know, I'm a GSR. Next thing you know, I'm an alternate DCM. Next thing you know, I'm a DCM. I'm like, what am I doing? And they give you these jobs to do, and I'm like, I have no idea. They had me as like the committee that had to go picking the places where all of the conventions were going to be and things like that. And I'm like, I have no clue how to do any of this stuff. And they said, you're perfect for the job. I'm like, okay. So that's how you learn in AA. You just do what they tell you to do. I remember going up to Raleigh going, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm in. Site convention committee. I'm like, sites. The most I know is, a little hotel somewhere. I don't know how to host big or get a place for big conventions. But the thing that was different was that I was listening, and I was willing to do what anybody asked me to do, because something told me deep inside that was the key. That was the key to being able to live a good life, give back what was so freely given to me. And I tried really hard to do those things. Well, can't say that I was best at any of it. I just didn't say no, honestly. This is all that it was. And I got, I believe in this program. I think that was what was the most important part for me. It was like, it was working. I was stringing together. I had a little bit of lightheartedness. I learned how to laugh again, which, I had gone to counseling after PTC, and I think at one point he had asked me, to remember when the last time I was happy. And at that time, this was early in sobriety, and at that time, the only thing I could think about was a time when I was about 8 years old and was outside in the yard playing and stuff. Now that wasn't true. It's just that that's the dark place this alcoholism had brought my mind to. So, a lot of times when I've told my story, the fact that, I was dancing on tabletops or cars or things like that, and I'm standing here talking, it isn't equating to the person that's saying it. But those are the places that my alcoholism brought me to. But the dark places, are just as important to remember and to face. The fact that, this is a scary, lonely disease. I went to a place that I felt there was no return, that the anguish that I felt inside my heart was never going to get any better. But, and so I did what you asked me to do just because you asked me to do it, not because I believed in it, honestly. Not in the beginning. I really didn't, until I started to feel a little bit better. And then, Ginny and I went on a great trip. I was 4 years sober, and we went on a trip together all the way up to Cape Cod and back again. And I remember when we got to Virginia, there's a sign that when you go into Virginia, it says, "Keep Virginia green." And she said, that's what you need to do with your sobriety. Keep it green. remember where you came from. And I'm like, oh, wow, there's signs everywhere, helping us to go along our way, right? So I think for me, the next part of the journey came when I really started to feel like I get it. I get that dark place. I get how people come into this program with so much anguish in their heart that they don't know what to do with it. And somebody had asked me to sponsor them. At first I didn't feel like I had anything to offer. I really didn't feel like I had anything at all to offer, except for the fact of that loneliness and that experience of waking up not knowing if my car had more dents in it, not knowing how on earth, I didn't actually hurt somebody. And then, so we just walked the journey together, and in the beginning, I did all the wrong things. I would try to help him out, do all the wrong things, and then I realized that all I have is to give anybody is what was given to me. I finally got that dandy little device off my car. And the only reason that I got through any of that, I'll back up a little bit, is there was a member of this program who was also a lawyer. And I love this man dearly. He's gone now. But he was the first person. I remember standing in court, because obviously what I had done was pretty severe. I left the scene of an accident. I sideswiped somebody. I kept going. I did all, a whole host of things. And we were standing in court, and he actually, presented his Exhibit A, and he said, "This is my Exhibit A. This lady deserves to have a chance." And I was just blown away. He convinced that judge, and all I ended up having to do was, I'd already had the device on my car, was some community service and pay those fines. I don't think that would happen today, but I felt very, very blessed. He was a beautiful soul, and he believed in me. And when someone believes in you, it changes. And that's the only thing I had to offer to the women that asked me to sponsor them, was that I believe in them. I believe that if I can do it, anybody can do it. I believe that, it's not easy. And there are going to be times when the one thing you want more than anything else in the world is to drink. And that you can, if you're willing to pick up that phone, reach out to somebody. That women's meeting gave me a list of women's names, a mile long. They all met me, said hi to me, went back to that house. I couldn't put a face with a name, but I had to call somebody, so I just went down the list and called somebody, and it was Shay. I don't know if any of you remember. And she came and got me, brought me to a meeting. My car was probably, who knows what it was at that time. But the point I'm trying to make is the fact that you can get help very easily. It's just a phone call away. And then, so the growth starts to happen, right? My family came back. My daughter, who wanted nothing to do with me, who the night that she realized I had been drinking again, just literally fell to the floor in tears, wanted absolutely nothing to do with me. And then, she went through troubles of her own, and I don't know how many years sober, 7 years sober, and she asked me to be with her when she had, a very difficult delivery of twins, and one had to be medevaced in Chapel Hill. And she asked me to be there. She asked me to be with that baby. She would never have asked me years before. It just would not have happened. So the journey goes on, and I really feel like my higher power brought me to this very day, that he knew what was deep in my heart. He knew the love that I wanted to be able to give back freely. And he put women in my life that at times when, things were very, very difficult. I'll never forget, some of you know, I have one of my children is one of us, very much so, and struggles horribly, and was going down a very dark road. And there's nothing more torturous for me, being an alcoholic, than watching an alcoholic suffer in their disease. It's torture when you can't help them. And I couldn't reach him. I tried, but I could not reach him. I mean, and his story is colorful too. He didn't just stick to alcohol. And seeing him curled up in a ball, crying hysterically because he couldn't stop doing what he was doing, and me being powerless to help him and wanting to so bad. And then a lot of you know Iris from the Bethany House. She calls me and she says, you know, I have somebody I'd like you to sponsor. I'm like, oh gosh, my life's a mess right now. I don't think I could sponsor anybody. I don't think I'd be any good to anybody. And walked Laura into my life. And it was a blessing beyond blessing. God knew what I needed. God knew exactly what I needed. Here was somebody that wanted help, that was willing to do anything I suggested. She was willing to, you know, hear the hard truths, hear the honest reaction to some of the things that she would say and where I had been, and I knew, but how, you know. Time will heal. Time will heal you. You will be able to get through all of this. And it was amazing because I remember those first couple of days, you know, I was probably half engaged because I was so worried, you know, and then I realized, you know, I just need to get out of that situation because God puts the people in your life that He knows that you would be good for both sides. It was so healing for me to be able to do that. And there were other women along the way too. Some we share very, very similar journeys, you know, that where they, you know, how many of us in here have a loved one that has this disease that we cannot help until they want the help. It's worse than my own hell that I went through in my own disease. To me, you know, I don't know if everybody else has any experience with that, but it was torture. It was absolute torture. I remember begging God to just make him well, take that disease away from him, and then realizing that I was powerless. I am powerless over people, places, and things. I cannot change anybody. I can't change anything. The only thing I can change is myself. And I worked hard at doing that. I worked hard at learning how to be a good listener and try to hear what somebody is sharing with me in case they are in trouble and are trying to reach out, right? And that's what I've done over the years. I really feel, you know, and when this fun pandemic hit and everybody, you know, ended up not being able to come to meetings, I was petrified because there was some new people in the group and whatnot, and what were they going to be able to do? That's a very scary thing for me, to know that we cut off a lifeline for people that were desperate. If it had been cut off from me, I don't know, you know, I wasn't brave enough or outgoing enough to get on a Zoom meeting or whatever. But so I hosted a Zoom meeting for a while. It's still up, I think, and realized that, you know, there's only small ways that I can give back. They really are very small ways, but if one person gets touched, one person gets reached in all of that, then it was worth it to me. Absolutely worth it. Because the hell that we go through, I don't think anybody came in here because they thought it was going to be a picnic. You know, everybody that walks through these doors to get help is because they got to the darkest place in the deep depths of their soul that they didn't know how to get out of, and they needed something. So took me 2 years to get a sponsor. I don't recommend that. Like I said, I was a very private person. Every time I would think about all the horrible things I had done, I would just get in panic, anxiety mode, whatever it was, I don't know. But I couldn't speak. I could not say it out loud for the longest time. And I remember when I finally asked her, it was one night at Bath, and somebody had read the promises, and they had been reading the promises, and I get the promises, and I can probably recite the promises without the words in front of me, but I always used to inwardly balk and reject. You will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. I'm like, this is such a lie. Nobody in this room, and I was up at Bath, nobody in this room can say they don't regret the past. Everybody regrets the past. That's not true, you know. But she said something, and Lord, to this day, I don't know what it is. I'm sorry. I'm going to leave you with a cliffhanger. I don't know what she said to me, but it resonated. And I went, oh, okay. Probably something like, you don't regret the past, because that's the gift that God gives you, or your higher power, to go use for somebody else, to give them the gift of sobriety. Something to that, and I'm like, oh, so I can use this in a way that might help somebody? And it kind of changed. So I asked her to be my sponsor, and she took me through the book, and she took me slowly, gently, because I was a scared kitten. I was going to run for the hills, especially if I had to tell you all that stuff. Oh my gosh. And so she took me slowly, and then one weekend we went up to the mountains with the intent to go camping and whitewater rafting and to do my fifth step. So I knew what was coming, and it was preoccupied in my mind and whatnot, but when we did it, it was so freeing. It was absolutely freeing. And she said, okay, so it doesn't have to be about alcohol or anything like that, or anything horrible you've done or whatever you're ashamed of. Just tell me something that you've never told anybody else. And I did have this secret, because I grew up in a house full of secrets, that I had never shared with anybody. And I shared it with her. And that's when something deep, deep, deep inside me changed, completely and forever. The world didn't swallow me up. I didn't disintegrate. I was still okay after I shared that. And that was when I realized, you can actually be free from this disease, and you can be of service to somebody else. And that freedom, that little bird that was locked up in that cage for so many years, was free, absolutely free. I could be me again. You could accept me, the Velveteen Rabbit, without my fur, and it was going to be okay. Nobody was judging me. Everybody had a story, some more colorful, some a little, whatever, but they were all a part of them. It was all from their deep soul, where they knew that they had a problem and they couldn't get over it, and they needed help. And that was the bottom line. And so I've just continued on this journey, and has it been wonderful? Nobody's life is wonderful, but what it has been real. It's been genuinely real. I've had, discord with family members. I've had, issues where, people that I love very much keep hurting themselves. Hopefully, I'm not even going to say that out loud, because he's doing okay. I don't want to jinx it. Don't want to jinx it. But there's joy in that. You know what I mean? For him to ask if it's does he mind? Do I mind if he goes to a meeting that I go to? Heck no! Come, please. That kind of thing. And my daughters. The relationship with the rest of my family has been a bond that I would have missed had I not come in this program. It's an incredible bond. My one daughter and I got to go to Scotland 3 years ago, a trip of a lifetime. If you would have told me 20 years ago, 18 years ago, whatever, that she would have wanted me to do that with her, I would have never, ever believed it. She wanted no part of me. And my other daughter, she We have a unique relationship. It's very, very special. She gets me. She helps me. When I get in jams, she helps me to see where I am and how I can, I'm doing that thing that comes natural to me, hide, not tell you what's going on. And she has a very gentle, loving, giving way of pulling out of me and helping me to recognize that kind of thing. And that's a beautiful thing. I've continued to sponsor women, and I'm sponsored. We share something in this program that I don't find other places. I do have a faith that I have gone back to. I went back probably in my 3rd year of sobriety, and it comforts me. It balances it, though, because I have to have both. I have to have the God of my understanding in my life. I have to have AA in my life, because without the two, there is no balance for me. And I like the balance, and I feel that I can grow. The other thing that I'll share, and I won't take up the whole time, I'm sure, because my story is kind of old and boring, but the thing I've recognized today is the fact that all the while I've been in this program, I've been growing. I've been learning, I've been growing. And I've remained, I think the reason that I've been able to stay sober one day at a time is because I remain teachable. You all have something to teach me. Your experiences teach me more than anything that I could read in a book, anything that I could find on the internet, anything that I could do at work. It's your lives that teach me how to live my life and how to know and how to interact with other human beings. I failed at that miserably. I failed at relationships miserably. I didn't know how to let somebody love me. Not really. I didn't want it, because I was afraid if there was love in this relationship, I was probably going to be the one that got hurt, and that wasn't going to happen. I know how to stop that. Let's just not have them. And for me, it worked, for a while. But it's a very shallow, lonely way to live, and it's not a good way. God put us on this earth. My God put us on this earth we are not on a deserted island, right? He wants people to interact with people. That's a thing that we've all been missing. That's a thing that we crave. We craved it in a bottle. We were getting that companionship out of that bottle. It was a dark, lonely place, not a place I need to be. So one of my favorite prayers is the St. Francis prayer, and I think about it a lot. Let me be an instrument of thy peace. Where there's hatred, let me sow love. Whereas there's despair, hope. And the hope is in this room. And I know that each person that walks through these rooms didn't do it because they thought it was going to be a picnic. But the work is worth it. The work is worth it. The life that I have today is nothing that I could have ever dreamt of. And I thank each and every one of you for letting me speak here tonight. Thank you.